Abigail Rose stood in her modest Boston apartment, the smell of ink and paper filling the air as she perused the newspaper spread before her. Among the mundane listings of jobs and advertisements, one particular ad caught her eye, a promise of love and a new life out west where a man sought a wife to share his homestead. The words danced with allure, stirring a longing deep within her. She envisioned rolling plains, a sturdy farmhouse, and laughter shared over warm meals. This was her chance to escape the confines of her current life, marked by drudgery and unfulfilled dreams. With every ounce of determination she could muster, Abigail penned her response and sent it off into the unknown. The weeks passed with anxious anticipation, and when she finally received a reply, it ignited a spark of hope in her heart. Packing her few belongings, Abigail set off on a journey that would lead her to the rugged landscape of Drywell. Upon arrival, however, the reality of her new surroundings quickly extinguished that spark. Dusty streets stretched before her, lined with wooden buildings that seemed to sag under the weight of their own secrets. As she stepped off the stagecoach, a sense of unease washed over her. The townsfolk paid little attention to her presence, their laughter felt hollow against the backdrop of an unsettling silence. It wasn't long before she met Caleb, the man who had promised companionship but whose brutish demeanor revealed his true nature. His rough hands gripped hers too tightly as he spoke about their future together, not as partners but as master and servant. Disappointment soured Abigail's hopes. This was not the life she had envisioned. As shadows settled over Drywell, whisperings reached Abigail's ears about a darker truth lurking beneath its facade. A trafficking ring masquerading as matchmaking for lonely pioneers seeking love. Sensing danger yet refusing to be defeated, Abigail resolved to uncover the truth. She began quietly observing those around her, determined to find allies in this oppressive town, a runaway girl in hiding and two women burdened by loss and resilience. With each passing day, Abigail's resolve strengthened. She would not allow herself to be trapped in this cage. Instead, she would fight for freedom, not just for herself but for all who suffered under Drywell's cruel facade. Stepping off the stagecoach, Abigail Rose felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. The dusty air hung heavy with the scent of earth and wood, and the sun cast long shadows across the weathered buildings of Drywell. At first glance, the town could have been a scene from a romantic tale, its saloons bustling with laughter and storefronts filled with goods that promised a simpler life. But as she took in her surroundings, unease crept into her heart. The townsfolk moved about with an air of guardedness, smiles felt forced, and conversations hushed at her approach. Abigail's mind raced as she grappled with this dissonance between her dreams and the unsettling reality before her. There was no mistaking it. Behind the charming facade lay an undercurrent of something sinister. As she made her way through the streets, she spotted Caleb waiting for her at the entrance of a modest establishment labeled as a boarding house. His brutish demeanor was further illuminated in the stark light of day, his imposing figure silhouetted against the backdrop of innocence the town had attempted to project. As he welcomed her with a grip that felt more possessive than affectionate, Abigail's heart sank. This was not the partnership she had envisioned. This man sought control rather than companionship. Days folded into nights, each moment spent in Drywell revealing more of its dark secrets. Whispers floated through the air, talk of women disappearing, reappearing only to endure indignities meant for merchandise rather than human beings. The so-called matchmaking was a cover for a trafficking ring, and Abigail's pulse quickened as she realized how easily she could have become another victim if she hadn't recognized the lies beneath the town's false allure. Finding solace in her determination, Abigail began to navigate this labyrinthine town with caution. She observed the hustle and bustle around her, searching for signs of hope amidst despair. That hope flickered in unexpected places. A runaway girl sipping whiskey in a dimly lit saloon, the widow who worked tirelessly at the blacksmith shop, and a drifter nursing old wounds and holding strong principles. These encounters stirred something within Abigail. She wasn't alone in her fight against the shadows that loomed over Drywell. Her resolve hardened. She was ready to challenge this facade and dare to enact change in a town that underestimated her strength. As Abigail stood before the modest boarding house, her heart tightened with anxiety. Caleb, her would-be husband, loomed at the entrance, his silhouette casting a long shadow over her hopes. From the moment she stepped onto Drywell's dusty streets, he had been her greatest disappointment, a stark reminder of the harsh realities lurking beneath the town's surface. Caleb was a man of imposing stature, with broad shoulders and hands marked by the labor of backbreaking work. His face was rugged, etched with lines that spoke of a life lived hard and fast, hardened further by an unyielding character. While Abigail had envisioned a supportive partner who would share in life's struggles, she quickly discovered that Caleb embodied control rather than companionship. His grip, strong and possessive, left no room for affection. It was a constant reminder of her powerlessness in this new world. His voice carried a gravelly edge as he spoke, commanding and curt, while his eyes, cold and calculating, seemed to measure her worth against some unseen scale. Caleb's demeanor struck fear into those around him, evident in the way townsfolk avoided his gaze and hushed their conversations when he approached. He was known to hold sway over many decisions in Drywell, elevating him to a position where he felt invulnerable and entitled. With each interaction, Abigail felt the weight of her expectations suffocating under his oppressive presence. She had imagined a partnership forged in mutual respect, where love would blossom amid shared labor and dreams of prosperity. Instead, under Caleb's watchful eye, she felt like an obligation pinned to his side, an item on a checklist rather than a cherished companion. Days blended into evenings filled with tension as Caleb's brutish nature became increasingly unbearable. He belittled her attempts at making a life in Drywell, dismissing her hopes as naive fantasies. His arrogance revealed an unsettling truth. He viewed her not as an equal but as property. Yet amid this bleak reality, a flicker of defiance ignited within Abigail. She refused to be reduced to mere possession and recognized that she must reclaim her agency. Though the path ahead was daunting, she resolved to rise against Caleb's dominion while gathering the courage to challenge the very systems designed to keep women like her subdued. The fight for liberation began within her heart, forging an unbreakable will to uncover the truth behind Drywell's facade. As Abigail settled into the grim reality of Drywell, she began to notice the pervasive influence of the town's sheriff, a man named Sheriff Grady, whose reputation cast a long shadow over her hopes for change. With a broad-brimmed hat pulled low and a face hardened by years of corruption, Grady was a figure who commanded both respect and fear. His presence was felt everywhere, from the saloon where laughter echoed to the dusty streets where whispers of discontent lingered in the air. Rumors swirled around him like smoke, tales of his ties to the trafficking ring that hid behind the facade of matchmaking. Grady was no mere enforcer of law, he was its perversion, a man who turned a blind eye to the crimes committed under his watch as long as the right coins filled his pockets. Abigail learned that he had protected Caleb and others involved in this dark business, ensuring that their operations remained unchecked while exploiting the vulnerable, women seeking love, safety, or a new life. One evening, as Abigail sat in the shadowy corner of the saloon nursing a drink, she overheard hushed conversations between patrons discussing recent disappearances and warnings about crossing paths with Grady. His cold stare was said to instill a paralyzing fear in those who dared to defy him. A sense of dread settled in her stomach as she realized how deeply rooted his power was within Drywell. He was not just an obstacle but a formidable adversary. Determined not to let fear paralyze her resolve, Abigail began piecing together information about Grady's dealings. She observed him closely during his rounds, taking note of how he interacted with townsfolk and those who dared question him. He operated with an unsettling confidence, knowing he held the reins on both sides of the law, protecting his interests while terrorizing anyone who might challenge them. As she gathered her allies, a runaway girl hiding from her past, a widow with wisdom and strength forged through loss, and a drifter haunted by his own scars, Abigail understood that confronting Sheriff Grady would be perilous. Yet their collective determination fueled her courage. They would need to devise a strategy to expose Grady's corruption and dismantle the trafficking ring that had ensnared so many innocent lives. With each passing day in Drywell, Abigail's resolve intensified. She recognized that exposing Grady would be key to liberating not only herself but also countless others trapped within this cruel system. The stakes were high, but she refused to back down. It was time for justice to rise from the depths of despair. With a growing sense of purpose, Abigail realized that to confront the dangers looming over Drywell, she had to delve deeper into the town's operations. Her heart raced with determination as she transformed from a mere bystander into a vigilant observer. She began frequenting the saloon, its dim, smoky ambience concealing conversations brimming with hushed whispers and frantic exchanges. Each night, Abigail positioned herself in a corner booth, her eyes scanning the room for any signs of trouble. The patrons spoke in low tones, exchanging news and rumors about women who had gone missing and others who had returned to their homes bearing hollow expressions. They were often accompanied by grim men, figures like Caleb and Sheriff Grady, who watched over them like hawks guarding their prey. In this environment, Abigail found pieces of information that could prove invaluable. During these nights of quiet observation, she also noted the interactions between townsfolk. The underground network that kept the trafficking ring alive was not made up of faceless villains. Rather, it comprised neighbors and acquaintances blinded by either fear or complacency. Abigail wished desperately to ignite some flicker of empathy in those residents. Nevertheless, every passing day underscored her brewing anger toward the oppressive forces that continued to suffocate the town. As she mingled cautiously with patrons, Abigail discreetly engaged in conversation, piecing together snippets of critical information. She gathered intelligence on those involved in the trafficking ring and learned about safe houses and routes used to transport women far from the reach of their loved ones, all served under the guise of matchmaking. Fear threatened to seep back into her heart, but resolve pushed her forward. Every morsel of knowledge she accrued fortified her growing inclination to act. Realizing she needed allies who shared her vision for liberation, Abigail connected more purposefully with the runaway girl at the saloon, inviting her to share her story. Their bond forged a foundation of trust that laid roots for future plans. The blacksmith's widow became an unexpected confidant as well, dispelling the isolation that had bound them both. As each day passed in Drywell, resilience emerged as Abigail's most vibrant armor. Her once beating heart now pulsed with steadfast courage, a flame ignited not by fear but by unwavering hope for change. She was readying herself not just for survival but for a fight against an insidious darkness that had concealed itself behind laughter and charming facades. Drawing strength from her burgeoning alliances, Abigail prepared to take decisive action to expose the town's sinister secrets and pave the way toward genuine freedom. As Abigail continued her quest for allies, she met pivotal characters whose stories intertwined with her own and whose strengths could prove invaluable in the battle for justice in Drywell. The first was a runaway girl named Layla, who had taken refuge in the saloon after escaping a terrible situation. With wide, haunted eyes and unkempt hair, Leela carried the burden of her experiences like a heavy cloak. When Abigail approached her one evening, Leela hesitated but eventually opened up, detailing her harrowing journey that led her to flee a life of exploitation. She spoke of promises made by men who lured women under the guise of affection, but delivered them instead to shadows where hope lay dead. Abigail felt an immediate connection. She saw her own vulnerability reflected in Leela's story, and she recognized the fierce resolve beneath the girl's fragility. In stark contrast to Leela's youthful desperation was Clara, the blacksmith's widow. With arms sinewy from years of work at the forge, Clara embodied resilience and tempered strength. Her husband had been a man of integrity, but after falling victim to Grady's machinations, refusing to comply with the sheriff's demands for silence, he was silenced forever. Since then, Clara had vowed to seek justice not only for herself, but also for others like her who were caught in Drywell's dark web. Abigail was inspired by Clara's unwavering resolve and saw in her a mentor, a guide who understood the stakes they faced and one who could rally support among other residents. Finally, there was Silas, a scarred drifter whose reputation preceded him. He wandered into town just as Abigail was solidifying her connections with Leela and Clara. His bullet-scarred cheek served as a reminder of battles fought, and his rough exterior concealed a heart driven by conscience. Having witnessed injustice firsthand, Silas had developed a moral compass that guided his actions toward helping those in need. Despite his guarded demeanor, he recognized Abigail's fire and sought to aid her cause. With each of these newfound allies, Leela's innocence and fear transformed into courage, Clara's wisdom fueling their fight for justice, and Silas lending strength through his experiences. Abigail found herself part of a coalition ready to challenge the oppressive structures that held Drywell hostage. Together, they began forging a plan rooted in their shared experiences and built on trust. Each step forward was laced with danger yet fueled by a profound determination that echoed through the dark corners of their town. They would not remain pawns any longer. They would fight for liberation. Wielding their individual strengths and shared goals, Abigail, Lila, Clara, and Silas formed an unlikely alliance that resonated within the gloom of Drywell. Each member brought unique skills to the table, creating a tapestry of resilience woven from their experiences. With Abigail's sharp insight and determination fueled by her own struggles for freedom, she emerged as a natural leader among the group. Her intelligence guided their plans, enabling them to navigate the treacherous waters of the town's oppression. Lila, still grappling with her trauma and fear, proved to be resourceful in gathering information, showing an innate ability to blend in with various groups. Her youthful perspective and emotional insight often unmasked hidden fears or desires in others, making her a valuable asset when they sought support from the townsfolk. While she might have started as a timid runaway, her courage began to blossom within this newfound camaraderie. Clara stood firmly as a pillar of strength. Her life experiences in the forge, the sweat and toil, gave her both physical fortitude and a relentless spirit. She understood the importance of creating connections among the residents of Drywell who had been silenced. Utilizing her social standing as the widow of a respected craftsman, she reached out to others who would lend a hand in their mission for justice. In Clara's quiet resilience lay the reminder that every battle fought for truth was worth the effort. Silas rounded out their alliance with his practical wisdom and street smarts honed from years of survival on the road. Scarred by his past but imbued with a fierce sense of justice, he became not just a lookout during their clandestine meetings, but also a voice that inspired action when anxiety threatened to consume them. His presence was like that of an unyielding shadow. Though feared by some, he harbored compassion and understanding for those wronged. As Abigail convened their meetings in secret at the saloon after hours, laughter mixed with tense discussions about strategy became common threads binding them more tightly together. The plan began to take shape, first gathering evidence of Sheriff Grady's corrupt dealings, while discreetly enlisting support from other women who felt trapped under Caleb's watchful eye. With distrust permeating Drywell and danger always lurking in the shadows, each step forward demanded bravery from every member of their alliance. United by common purpose against circumstances that sought to ensnare them individually, Abigail and her companions ignited not only hope within themselves, but also dared to inspire change throughout Drywell itself. A spark they believed could illuminate even the darkest corners of their town if only they worked together tirelessly for freedom's elusive embrace. With their alliance solidifying, Abigail, Lila, Clara, and Silas knew that the time had come to turn their collective resolve into action. They gathered in a dimly lit corner of the saloon late one evening, each member bringing their insights and ideas to the forefront. The weight of their mission loomed large, yet a sense of purpose electrified the air as they began to develop a comprehensive plan to expose the trafficking ring that had ensnared so many. Abigail initiated the discussion by laying out their primary goal: gathering irrefutable evidence against Sheriff Grady and his associates. She proposed that they start by discreetly following known figures within the trafficking operation, who often frequented the saloon. Leela volunteered for this role, her youthful appearance allowing her to blend in with potential victims waiting for matches. Armed with her keen observation skills, she could gather vital information without drawing suspicion. Clara's experience in forging connections among townsfolk proved invaluable as she suggested rallying support from those who had remained silent out of fear. She recalled her late husband's friends, men and women who respected him but were now too intimidated to speak out against Grady's tyranny. Clara vowed to approach them cautiously, planting seeds of discontent that could grow into a movement for justice. Silas, with his street-smart instincts, recommended they use the cover of community gatherings to discreetly disseminate information about the true nature of matchmaking in Drywell. People are more likely to talk when they feel safe, he noted. By presenting themselves as allies rather than adversaries, they could encourage others to share their experiences and knowledge. As they crafted this multifaceted approach, Abigail felt a surge of optimism. Their plan was not merely about gathering evidence, it was about awakening a collective consciousness within Drywell's residents, a chance to break the chains of fear that had silenced so many. In the following days, they set their plan into motion. Each member embraced their roles with determination, observing suspicious activities and engaging with townsfolk under the guise of friendship. They distributed pamphlets subtly hinting at the truth behind Drywell's matchmaking services while inviting others to share their stories in a safe space. Amidst these efforts, they faced setbacks. Threats from Caleb and warnings from Sheriff Grady loomed over them like dark clouds, but each adversity only strengthened their resolve. With every piece of evidence collected and every whisper turned into action, Abigail and her companions drew closer to unraveling the oppressive grip that held Drywell captive. As hope flickered like a candle in the darkness, they understood that change was possible if they stood united against their shared adversaries. Their clandestine efforts not only aimed at exposing a sinister operation, but at igniting a fire within the hearts of those who had long been silenced. Together they would rise against injustice and fight for freedom in every sense of the word. As Abigail and her allies pressed forward with their plan, the weight of their mission intensified, and so did the threats looming from Sheriff Grady and his enforcers. The atmosphere in Drywell shifted, filled with a palpable tension that seeped into every corner of their lives. Whispers of discontent began to circulate among the townsfolk, but they were quickly stifled by fear, the kind that men like Grady instilled with their darkened glances and menacing presence. One evening, as Abigail and Clara set out to meet Leela and Silas at the saloon, they noticed a group of men loitering nearby. Their laughter masked an edge of intimidation, eyes scanning the street as if searching for trouble. Abigail's heart raced as she recognized the unmistakable faces of Caleb's friends, men loyal to the sheriff and eager to protect the status quo. The sight sent a shiver down her spine. She knew this would not be the last time they encountered such hostility. Inside the saloon, Leela recounted her latest observations while a nervous energy crackled in the air. She had overheard conversations about women who had gone missing recently, rumors that hinted at something more sinister happening behind closed doors. As they huddled together, voices hushed, Abigail felt an urgent need to act before they became targets themselves. Silas, ever perceptive to danger, voiced his concerns. "They know something's changing," he warned. "If we're not careful, we might find ourselves in their crosshairs sooner than expected." His words reverberated through the group like a cold wind, but Abigail's resolve remained unyielded. They could not afford to back down now. Too many lives depended on their actions. As days turned into weeks, their threat level rose. One afternoon, while Clara was out gathering supplies for their efforts, she was confronted by two enforcers outside the general store. They blocked her path, eyes narrowed in grins that chilled her to the bone. "You should keep your mouth shut about things that don't concern you," one said, his voice low and threatening. Clara stood firm, refusing to let fear dictate her actions. Back at their meeting place later that night, Clara shared her harrowing encounter with Abigail and Layla. It became clear to them all, intimidation tactics were ramping up as Sheriff Grady sensed their growing determination to expose him. Inspired by Clara's courage but aware of the increased risks, they adjusted their strategies. More caution was needed. Every move had to be calculated. Yet amid rising tensions and mounting threats, Abigail felt an unshakable fire igniting within her, a belief that justice could prevail against oppression. They would not be cowed. Instead, each confrontation only deepened their commitment to freeing Drywell from its suffocating grip. As shadows closed in around them, they understood that perseverance would ultimately illuminate a path toward liberation. They just needed to hold fast against despair and dare to challenge those who sought to keep them silent. The day of reckoning arrived, thick with tension and anticipation as Abigail and her allies prepared to execute their carefully crafted plan. Under the cover of dusk, they gathered in the saloon, each heart pounding with the weight of what lay ahead. Their breaths mingled in the dim light, charging the air with an urgency that felt almost electric. They had spent weeks gathering evidence and rallying support, but now it was time to confront Sheriff Grady and unveil the truth behind Drywell's sinister matchmaking facade. Abigail stood at the center of their makeshift meeting, her voice steady as she reminded her companions of their shared goal: to reveal the human trafficking that operated beneath the surface. "Tonight we expose not just Grady but the entire system that has held this town captive," she declared, her words igniting a fire in each member's spirit. Leela embraced her role as a scout and facilitator among vulnerable women, ready to gather and usher them toward safety when the moment called for action. Clara planned to speak out at a community gathering scheduled for later that evening, rallying those too afraid to stand up for themselves. Silas would act as their protector, scanning for any sign of danger that could disrupt their carefully laid groundwork. As they executed their plan, a wave of apprehension rippled through the saloon's crowd. With Clara taking center stage under the pretext of discussing local affairs, whispers filled the room like flotsam before a flood. Abigail caught glimpses of Sheriff Grady lurking near the back wall, his presence intimidating as he watched with sharp eyes, a hawk assessing its prey. The tension grew thicker with each passing minute. Suddenly, Clara addressed the room directly, calling attention to missing women whose fates had been trampled underfoot by greed and fear. "This town deserves better than oppression masked as matchmaking. We deserve justice." Her powerful words rippled through the audience, stirring murmurs of agreement from those who had been silenced for far too long. At that moment, Leela got up and motioned toward Abigail to signal it was time. As they struck from different angles, Leela guiding frightened women close to exit points while Sela stood close enough to intervene if trouble arose, alarm bells rang in Grady's mind. Seeing descent fuel pressure upon his operation, he attempted to intervene but found himself confronted by determined townsfolk rallying behind Clara's bold stance. The confrontation escalated quickly, verbal disputes turned into chaotic shouts echoing throughout the saloon. The room erupted as community members chose to oppose Grady's grip on their lives en masse, supporters pouring forth courage in every corner. Realizing he'd miscalculated the strength in unity, Sheriff Grady's facade began to crack under pressure, a sight that filled Abigail and her allies' hearts with hope as they veered toward, uncovering just how deep Drywell's secret darkness ran. Their combined voice grew louder amidst chaos. Tonight would mark a turning point for Drywell, a descendance into either liberation or utter defeat, but they stood resolute against whatever shadows threatened to engulf them once more. As the chaos of the confrontation began to settle, Abigail and her allies found themselves in a pivotal moment of resolution. The confrontation in the saloon had sparked a fire within the townsfolk, emboldening those who had long been silenced by fear. Clara's passionate words resonated deeply, stirring a collective consciousness that transcended individual apprehensions. One by one, community members began to step forward, sharing their own stories of loss and exploitation, creating a chorus of voices clamoring for justice. Abigail seized this momentum, urging the townspeople to unite against Sheriff Grady and the trafficking ring that had preyed upon their vulnerabilities. "We are not alone in this fight. Together we can dismantle the chains of oppression," she called out, her voice ringing with conviction. The crowd responded with murmurs of agreement, hearts pounding with newfound courage as they recognized their shared strength. With Leela guiding frightened women towards safety and Sela standing resolute against any enforcers who dared to approach, the atmosphere shifted. The sheriff's intimidation tactics faltered as more townsfolk joined Abigail's cause, standing shoulder to shoulder against Grady's power. As tension escalated, the sheriff attempted to regain control, barking orders at his enforcers to disperse the crowd. However, the tide had turned. The people of Drywell were no longer willing to cower in silence. Clara rallied those around her, challenging anyone who sought to silence them once more. "We will not be your victims, we will not be your property," she declared, her unwavering spirit igniting further resolve among the townsfolk. The confrontation reached its climax when Abigail bravely stepped forward to confront Sheriff Grady directly. "You may think you control this town through fear, but we are reclaiming our voices," she shouted, her fierce determination echoing through the room. In that moment, it became clear that they were not merely fighting for themselves, but for every woman who had been trapped in a cycle of abuse and exploitation. As Sheriff Grady's facade crumbled under the weight of the community's unity, Abigail and her allies worked tirelessly to gather evidence from those willing to testify against him and the trafficking operation. With each revelation, they dismantled the intricate web of deceit that had allowed such oppression to thrive. By dawn, as the first light broke over Drywell, a new sense of hope emerged. Abigail and her companions had not only exposed the truth, but had inspired a movement that would ripple through the town long after they had dismantled the trafficking ring. Their courage had awakened a collective spirit that would continue to stand against injustice, one that would ensure such darkness could never take root in Drywell again. Reclaiming their agency, they forged a path toward healing and liberation, forever altering the course of their lives and their community. In the wake of their victory, Abigail Rose reflected on her transformative journey from a hopeful newcomer to an empowered leader within Drywell. The experiences that had once threatened to crush her spirit became the very foundation upon which she built her strength. She had entered this town filled with dreams of love and companionship, only to discover a harsh reality mired in exploitation and fear. However, through resilience and the forging of deep connections with her allies, Lila, Clara, and Silas, Abigail unearthed a courage she never knew she possessed. As they dismantled the trafficking ring and exposed Sheriff Grady's corruption, Abigail witnessed not only her own empowerment, but the awakening of a collective spirit among the townspeople. The camaraderie among them was palpable. Friendships forged in adversity became a beacon of hope. Each individual who stepped forward to share their story added a thread to the tapestry of resistance they were creating together. This unity forged an unbreakable bond as individuals transformed into a powerful community unwilling to accept oppression. Abigail understood that their fight was about more than just exposing a criminal operation. It was about reclaiming agency and dignity for every person in Drywell. The shadows of doubt that had clouded her mind were dispelled by the light of solidarity. In her heart, she carried the stories of those who had suffered, propelling her forward with an unwavering commitment to ensure that no one would face such darkness alone again. The themes of resilience and friendship echoed throughout the town as they established new systems of support for women and vulnerable individuals. Abigail and her allies worked tirelessly to create safe spaces for dialogue and healing, promoting justice and accountability not only for themselves, but for future generations. As Drywell began to heal, Abigail recognized that empowerment was a continuous journey. They faced challenges ahead, but with every step they could draw on the strength of their united front. The fight against injustice was far from over, yet the fire ignited within them had grown into a flame that could light the way through even the darkest of nights. Through this ordeal, Abigail learned that true empowerment comes not just from defeating an adversary, but from uplifting others along the way. As she stood amidst her friends and fellow townsfolk, she felt a profound sense of purpose. Together, they had not only reclaimed their lives but also forged a path toward justice that would resonate through Drywell and beyond, an enduring testament to the power of resilience, friendship, and unwavering hope in the face of adversity.